Hello everyone, my name is Megan Conneen and this is my performance-based project for EDU 513 Models of Teaching. For my lesson, I chose to incorporate Madeline Hunter's instructional theory into practice. Madeline Hunter's instructional model consists of 7 different parts. They are learning objectives, anticipatory set, lesson objectives, input, check for understanding, guided practice, and independent practice. As you continue through the PowerPoint, you will see how each part is incorporated into my lesson plans. Listed here are the different learning strategies that I incorporated into my lesson plans. These strategies include summarizing, providing recognition to the students, homework and practice, non-linguistic representations, cooperative learning, and identifying similarities and differences. Welcome to day 1 of my lesson plan. Today we will be focusing on patterns for a kindergarten classroom. Here are my learning objectives. After this 2-day lesson, students will be able to understand what a pattern is and be able to define it. Students will also know how to create a pattern using different objects, such as Unifix cubes, blocks, and letter beads. Students will also be able to create patterns in their base groups. Finally, students will be able to locate patterns around their home and create patterns using different items in their home. How will I know if the students are ready to learn? The anticipatory set always begins the lesson. It gets the students excited and ready to learn. It also allows students to use previous knowledge to answer questions and apply it to new knowledge. To begin, I will gather the students together on the rug. Since patterns is not a new skill for my students, I will begin by asking them to think really hard to make a prediction as to what a pattern is. I will take all possible predictions and log them on chart paper. Next, I will tell them what a pattern is. I would say something like, a pattern is something that keeps going and going and going in an order. Then, I will give an example of a pattern, such as red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, or circle, square, circle, square. Then, I will give an example of something that is not a pattern to show the difference. We will then discuss what makes them different and what makes them the same. For example, they both use colors, but one is a pattern and one is not. Next, I will ask my students to close their eyes and take a mental picture of what a pattern looks like in their minds. This will get them excited to begin their learning journey of patterns. To finalize the anticipatory set, the class will watch a short video of Mrs. Triggle teaching about patterns. How will the students know what I expect from them? Clearly stating the learning objectives before the students begin the lesson activity is a great way to ensure students know exactly what you expect from them. I may say something like, friends, today you will be able to work in a small group, create patterns using different materials at your tables, and then record your patterns on big chart paper for the class to see. This way, we are all perfect pattern makers. This will show the students what I want them to do, but also gets them excited to begin the activity. The input is the step-by-step instructions of exactly what is being done during the lesson activity. For this lesson, the first thing the students will do is get into their base groups of 4. These students are already familiar with the peers in their base groups and are a comfortable match. Next, I will give out student jobs so that each student is contributing something to the group and the outcome of the activity. The student jobs include a material getter, pattern makers, drawers, and the material cleaners. After students are assigned jobs, they are to obtain all materials and begin their patterns at their tables. At this time, I will be navigating around the room, making sure that all students are fully understanding the activity. After I have seen all patterns from the groups, they can then begin making the patterns on chart paper. The final step in the input is to have the students present their chart paper to the class. The students will explain their patterns while the other students listen. At the end of each presentation, I will ask for 3 pieces of feedback from the students to give to their peers. This way, students are hearing from their friends exactly what they enjoyed about their final products. Talk about a confidence booster. Hearing such feedback is like winning $1 million. Here are two pictures of what the final product looks like. On the left is a pattern using colored blocks, and on the right is a pattern on chart paper. How will I know that the students understood exactly what a pattern is? Check for understanding is the next part in the ITIP model. I checked for understanding when I walked around the room to ensure everyone knew what they were doing. Finally, I could also prove the children understood by their final presentations. Sometimes after a lesson, some students may have had a difficult time grasping a certain skill or concept. This is a great time for guided practice. Even if most students understood what a pattern was, I still always include guided practice just to reiterate what was just taught. First, I would gather all students on the rug again. Then I would create a pattern on the board and ask the class what would come next. For example, if I wrote circle, triangle, circle, triangle, circle, I would ask what would come next. We would then finalize the lesson by summarizing exactly what a pattern is once more. Homework will be assigned tonight for these kindergartners. They will be asked to go home and find different items that can be turned into a pattern. They can use things like pillows, canned food, and stuffed animals to create patterns. They will also be asked to record their patterns in their math journals to discuss the next day in school. Bringing a lesson home with the student allows them to practice the specific skill in a different setting other than school. It is also something fun that can be done with the whole family. I incorporated 5 different learning strategies into this lesson plan. The first one was identifying similarities and differences. We went over similarities and differences during the anticipatory set when I asked the students to identify what was similar and what was different about 2 patterns. They then compared what was similar and what was different about a pattern and then something that wasn't a pattern, so that they could see that not all shapes and colors put together make patterns. The next strategy I used was providing recognition, which is something that I use frequently during this lesson. In my recognition, I was always specific, so the students knew exactly what I enjoyed about their work in hopes that they would continue that work in the future. For example, I would say something like, "Wow, I really like that you used yellow, green, and blue to make your pattern." Another learning strategy I used was homework and practice. I assigned homework during the independent practice part where they were assigned to make patterns at home with different items around their house. Practice was performed during the guided practice where we sat together and I asked them to complete the pattern I would make on the board. This way, students are working with patterns as much as possible so they can fully grasp the concept. Next, I used non-linguistic representations in my lesson during the anticipatory set and the input. Students took mental pictures during the anticipatory set, which is a non-linguistic representation. They also worked with different items such as pattern blocks, letter beads, and shapes to create patterns. This was perfect for the learners that struggled using words to tell me what a pattern was. They could simply show me instead. Finally, I incorporated cooperative learning into my lesson during the input. I asked the students to work together to create patterns at their tables and then log their pattern on chart paper. The students were asked to work toward a common goal, and that is exactly what they did. Welcome to day 2 of my lesson plan. Today, we will still be focusing on patterns for a kindergarten classroom. The learning objectives for this lesson are similar to the one yesterday. Students will again be able to understand what a pattern is and define it. Students will also know how to create a pattern using different items. Next, students will be able to create patterns in a group setting. And finally, students will be able to create a pattern when making a piece of jewelry. How will I know if the students are ready to learn? I will begin the lesson by saying something like this. I'm going to write our math topic on the board from yesterday. Can anyone tell me what this word says? I'll give you a hint. It is what we did yesterday in math. The students will excitedly answer my question. We will then briefly go over what a pattern is again. This is a great refresher for all students, especially ones that may have forgotten what a pattern is. How will the students know what I expect from them? They will know by clearly stating the objectives for the day. I may say something like, today, we will be able to define a pattern, give examples of a pattern, and make our own pattern jewelry. This will not only inform the students of what I expect from them, but it also gets them excited about the upcoming activity. Here in the input, you will hear about the steps of the activity. First, the students will go back to their base groups. Again, they are already familiar with the peers in their base groups and work very well together. I will then hand out all supplies for making the jewelry. Next, I will ask the class to make patterns with the jewelry and to try to pick patterns that they want to put on the string for their jewelry. They will be asked to work together as a group and go to their group if they have any questions and/or need feedback on their pattern. This is a great time for the students to participate in a fun activity with their friends while still learning. Once their patterns are on their string, I will tie them on. We will then sit together to discuss and show off our jewelry that we just made. Here's a picture of what the final product might look like. How will I know if the students fully understood the concept from this activity? First, I can check for understanding by walking around the room and monitoring the students and their work. I will know that the students understand the concept of patterns when I see that they are making patterns. Also, seeing the final product will ensure that the students understand. There may still be a slight chance that some students may not fully understand the concept of patterns. If so, we can continue with guided practice. I always like to include guided practice regardless because it is fun and it is usually done as a whole class. For this guided practice, I will ask the students to collaborate together to create a class pattern on our smartboard. They can use things like shapes and colors to make the pattern. Each student will take turns going up to the smartboard and continuing the pattern. This is a great way to utilize technology in the classroom and also incorporate the skill they are currently learning. Independent practice, again, is a great way to allow students to bring their work outside of the classroom and into a new setting. Students will be asked to go home and share their homework with their families and friends. They will then be asked to describe to their friends and families why it is a pattern. Here are the learning strategies that I incorporated into my Day 2 lesson plan. The first is summarizing, which is what we did in the anticipatory set, the check for understanding, and the guided practice. I frequently asked my students what they learned and what they know about patterns to reiterate the previous lesson and to prove understanding. Next, I incorporated providing feedback, which again is like gold for them. I said things like, I love that you chose those 3 colors to make a pattern bracelet. They look great together. This way, the students know specifically what I like about their patterns, and they also know they are doing a great job. The next strategies I incorporated were homework and practice. Homework was given at the end of the lesson. Practice was performed during the guided practice where we created patterns on the smartboard. Non-linguistic representations were used during the input when the students created their jewelry. They could use items instead of words to show what they knew about patterns. Finally, cooperative learning was incorporated into the lesson during the guided practice. The class worked together to complete a class pattern. Before I began the lesson, I was a little nervous about whether or not the students would fully understand what a pattern was. Before this lesson, patterns had been briefly explained but not in much detail. Despite my nerves, I was surprised but happy to see that most, if not all, of my students were able to explain what a pattern was and then give examples of patterns. Throughout the lesson, I noticed a few children who struggled making patterns with their groups. Fortunately, there was always someone in their group that could help them out, and I began to see the positive effects of collaborative learning. The students were helping each other when they needed it, and it was such a wonderful sight to see. I very much enjoyed teaching this lesson to my students, and I felt that they fully understood what a pattern was, while at the same time still having fun and doing things they enjoy. Using Madeline Hunter's ITIP model helped me to lay out each part of my lesson and also assisted me when it was time to teach it. I could easily refer back to my lesson, and everything was right there written for me. I will be using the ITIP model in my future lesson plans. I felt that it was a great 2 days for both me as the teacher and for my class as well. Here is a list of websites where I obtained some of my pictures that were included in my slides. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen and view my performance-based project. Have a great day.